Was he opening? Was he opening gates? Was he opening doors
I
that he
mean,
shouldn't have been messing around with?
it made me wonder about, even his voice coming through and saying "stole my soul." It's like,
Right.
why would your soul be stolen? I mean, what were you doing in that house? I mean, were
Right.
you doing
Right.
occult activity?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another wonderful episode of the show, the Scary Movie Project, the podcast where we talk about what else? Scary movies. I am your host, Matt. And today we are talking, you guys know, more about Amityville at 50. We can't get enough of it. We love it. We like talking about it so much. I got my friend Sean Austin on here. Sean is a demonologist and paranormal investigator. We've had Sean on the show before. I reviewed some of his awesome stuff he's done, his documentaries, Devil Down South, and things like that. We can talk more about those. But Sean, thank you for coming on. You got some personal Amityville stuff. Thank you for coming on this program to talk a little bit about it with us today.
No, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
So, good publicity with the poster right behind you. So, 50 years of Amityville murders, right? Since it happened. Obviously, we know the movies and things like that, but you've kind of got an interesting personal touch to it, I would say, because you did a great doc called Amityville: The Resurgence. And if anyone hasn't seen it, please watch it. I believe it's Scare Network. You can check it out. I did a review for him. It's on my website, hilltopvideos.com. You can read it. But this is a piece where you never enter the home, you never enter Ocean Avenue, but you are outside doing a lot of work with, and is it Ralph? Is Sarchie? How was he involved in everything?
Well, he at the time was still living on Long Island. He's my mentor in demonology. And, after all my experiences, I had told him that I was going back there in front of the house to experiment with some new communication software that
Right.
I never used before. And I told him about some of the stuff that happened that night, and he wasn't prepared for what actually ended up happening in the car last night. Really blew him away with he really believes me for what I had told him that what had happened after he'd been there. So it's pretty much how it kind of started because I was at his house prior. We were just hanging out for the day, and I'm like, I'm gonna go over there because it was like 15 minutes from his house.
Yeah. So okay, that's awesome, right? So yeah, Amityville the Research, you had some wild stuff happen to you. So I'm gonna let you just kind of go blow by blow. Like I said, the idea started talking to him, and tell us about how this happened, and just tell us about this whole experience you had doing this piece and all the stuff you got from the spirit box you were using, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was quite a few years ago. I was live
Yeah.
streaming. I went down one day just to go to the Amityville house, and I decided to go by the DeFeo grave first. And I put on some of my devices, and it seemed that it was telling me it said John. That I was saying who's still here from the family. It said
Yeah.
John. I looked at the grave, and at the time, I didn't connect the dots which one John was. But I got back in my car because people were walking around. I wanted to give them respect of, checking on their, visiting their loved ones and whatever. So I put the spirit box in the car, and then this little boy's voice started to continuously come through the spirit box. And I asked him if he wanted prayer. And now this is how I, in my opinion, disseminate whether I'm dealing with a human spirit or something trying to trick me, is that the boy said, please pray for me. And so I
Wow.
did say a prayer. And then I went by the house in my car and continued the spirit box session. And this boy's voice kept on coming through over and over again. So when I got home that initial night, um, that was the first time where I had this very vivid vision of the Amityville house, where I was inside the house and there were these three distinct shadow figures at the top
Yeah.
of the stairs. And then this piano in an adjacent room picked up and threw at me, and I felt the jolt of it. And I woke up with the chills, and I saw this black mist go through my ceiling. And then I looked at the time; it was just 3:15 in the morning, which is the
Oh yeah.
alleged time of the
Oh my
murders
God.
where the DeFeos were killed. And that's where I'd have these recurring nightmares about the
Oh
house,
my
black
God.
mist through the ceiling, 3:15 in the morning. And it would just kind of be circling around me. And it went on for quite some time, on and off. And, at some point I'd be just doing random investigations, and things having to do with Amityville would be popping in around me, like flies appearing. I remember one
Mm.
investigation, out of nowhere. And then it
Wow.
literally screamed Amityville through the spirit box. A girlfriend was mine with me at the time.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, I remember, at some point, I was doing a session and George Lutz's voice came through the spirit box and said, Amityville stole my soul. Now, when I took the recording back, I realized that it was, it really sounded like his voice. So I took a piece of his true, real interview when the man was alive, and it sounds identical. Actually, his personal friend watched the documentary and she dropped her drink when she heard the voice and said, that's his voice.
Oh my.
So, like I said, and then what ended up happening is that Ralph, when he came with me to go, all those crazy things came through while we were in the car. That was mind blowing to the two of us. But again, it seemed like the boy was still there. And Ralph, after experiencing it firsthand with me in front of the house without even leaving the car, he gave up his mass for that boy the next day. And the boy never came through again. So I had written about that in my second book, Shadow Chaser: The In-Between, but I didn't know that I ended up doing a documentary. So when I decided to do a documentary with ScareNetwork.tv, we went back there in front of the house to do some sessions to see if I could get some more information to validate what we believe happened, that the boy was gone or anything like that. And, we're outside in front of the house and a ball of light and 30-degree weather comes fly around the car, comes through the windshield, flying around in the car with me. And then my camera shuts off. I mean, I don't know anybody else that has some sort of visual potential paranormal, capture on video while you're staring at the Amityville since, the 70s when the Warrens were there. And then we got validations about the three shadows and how they're pissed and that the boy had crossed over. So, it's really wild. It was really wild. And I think that's what makes the documentary unique, is that all the other documentaries about it just tell you the typical story of what happened in the old days. And then they just like, is it a hoax or not? But I can tell you, from firsthand experience, I've seen this shit up close and personal. And it's no joke. It's some really nasty stuff, and it'll stick around and hover around you for quite some time. But this is something that's a typical experience that I have throughout the years. And when you try to pray for spirits and souls that are suffering, whatever it is that you really piss these things off, because they don't want to lose souls that are suffering. They know they want us to suffer in the physical plane, especially if they're in the earthbound realm as well. If these souls are stuck in any ways, especially this boy. Now, interesting to mention as well is that later on that year, after the documentary was released, there was another documentary about Amityville that came out. I just randomly decided to watch it. And I thought there was a really fascinating piece of the documentary that came through. And what that was that John DeFeo was allegedly the last person to die from the gunshot in the house out of the entire family. And to me, that just leaned more to validating potentially that if the whole family had been killed and their souls transition and this boy was the last one to pass away, who's to say that that's why the boy kind of came out of his body in the house looking for his family and was stuck ever since.
Wow. So he's the last one. Okay, so that's we go on that. So now him being stuck has since this happened, you said you were waking up at the time and having nightmare. Does that stuff still come to you? Is it attached to you? Anything that happened in that house? Or has it stayed where it was?
Well, interesting enough is that a friend of mine who's a legitimate person in the horror industry told me about, he actually bought a piece of one of the windows that was being sold on
I've
eBay.
heard about this. Yeah.
And he said it's legit, comes with a certificate of authenticity. And he's like, dude, it's the real thing. And I looked up about it, and ends up that they were doing renovations on the house in the 80s, and it was only like 30 something bucks. I'm like, screw it, I'm gonna get it. So
yes.
I ordered it, and the night before it came, I did see a vision of the Amityville house. And I'm like, crap, I didn't know if some weird stuff would happen after that, but it really didn't. The item definitely felt some energy off it, but here is the item right here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is supposed to be one
That's
of the
amazing
pieces of the windows in the original house.
Does that have any energy to it? Do
I
you
definitely feel
Yeah?
it does, has some sort of something with it, but
Okay.
again, I guess I'm lucky that I didn't know if I was going to start having like creepy stuff with the Emmy, because that stuff, when you start talking about it, that case, it just starts happening. But luckily it wasn't anything extreme going on.
So now when you got to prep, when you're going to go and do this case like that, whether it's Amityville or wherever the heck you're going, right? Before you even get to where you're going, you're in the town, you're, nearby New York City somewhere, like for instance, are you starting to, what kind of research are you putting in ahead of time? Or are you going in cold and, like the Warrens, like you mentioned, she was clairvoyant and she would just get these things. What kind of stuff do you prep for? Like when you went to do this for Amityville, what did you prep for, if anything, right?
I really didn't prep for anything when I originally went. I just
Okay.
wanted to go and do like a live stream and be cool to see what kind of stuff would come through in the sessions. I really didn't know. It wasn't something I always knew about the story, but I didn't really recall any of the intricate natures of the case. It kind of became an obsession for me after
Hmm.
these things started to happen to me. And of course, I look back into the whole interesting that happened to me years before I went to the Amityville house, and this actually happened. And that is, I had a very vivid vision that I was in the car, Lorraine Warren's to the left of me in a plaid skirt. Ed Warren's in the front seat, looks back at me, and he goes, "We're off to the Amityville house." And next thing you know, we're inside the Amityville house in that same place that I had a vision years later of the shadows at the top of the stairs. And he puts his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "Sean, we're back in time right now." I'm
Mm.
like, "Really?" He's like, "You're a big part of all this." And he says, "Take a look up." And the word accolade was floating in midair. And I remember even telling Ralph around that time, and he's like, "You got to be careful about those dreams. That could be ego based and this and that." But to me, it didn't have a bad vibe. And I wondered, I'm like, how the hell would I be involved with the Amityville case? But after everything that actually transpired, and I do believe that the boy ended up crossing over because of my initial visit and
Okay.
everything that happened with Ralph going with me. I believe that I was Ed Warren's spirit coming to me and telling me that it was some sort of honorary knighthood of saying I was able to help that boy
Wow.
cross over from that infamous haunted location.
So that was the question I had too. This is, we believe, John DeFeo, right? And that he did cross over finally. Did you have any sort of feeling or communication with anyone else in the family, or just with him?
Just with him and
Okay.
George. And then there was
Oh
one
yeah,
time
right.
that I have on the documentary, which I thought was really interesting, was I was randomly in a cemetery, and I think this is on the documentary too. Out of
Hmm.
knowing, I heard this voice say, "I'm in prison," and I have a very good ear,
Yeah.
and I knew immediately that sounds like Ron DeFeo Jr.'s
Oh
voice.
wow.
And
Yeah.
then I went back on his interview, and I'm like, that's his voice, and let alone listen to what he's saying. I'm in prison, and he was still alive in prison. So to me, for that one specifically, it was like the demonic was mimicking his voice and
You
mocking.
know what's interesting too? He has kind of a distinctive voice, doesn't he? He has
Very
that
distinct.
very New York accent. If you
Yes,
listen
he
to
was
him
like, I'm in
talk.
prison.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a very distinct
Yeah.
voice,
He
and
does.
if you listen to it on the documentary, you'll be like, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that is wild. So then you had the dream of the three shadow people you mentioned. Did you figure out? I'm sorry. Did you say who the shadow, what those were manifestations of, or
I
what they
don't
represented?
know what it was, but whatever it was pure evil. It had come
Mm.
to me many times in my bedroom. I mean,
Wow.
I remember distinctly one of
Just when you were like in town there, or you've had that happened afterward or whatever?
well, it followed me home after I initially prayed for the boy,
Okay.
and then there was stuff happening. Like, even when I was writing the book in the middle of the winter and the story about it, I'd sit there in my room and just hear zzz, like a fly
Yeah.
buzzing by my ear,
Yeah.
just really freaking weird.
Wow.
Or I would be floating over the house in a vision, like looking down, I could hear thousands of flies buzzing. But yeah, I was gonna say that the three shadow figures, I don't know who they are. I definitely think they're pure evil, but distinctly there was one of the visions I had of the whole thing happening every night in my bedroom at the time, where I was slowly walking up the stairs to the second floor, and I could see the paintings of the DeFeo family as I was going up the stairs. And immediately after that, I just had like the worst feeling. Like I felt
Mm.
like a peon. Like this evil thing made me feel so little, and
Wow.
I felt so overwhelmed. Like, what in the hell did I get myself into? Kind of feeling. Like, it made me feel so small. It was very, very creepy. What that thing made me feel like. But yeah, I mean, whatever it was, it's no joke. It's definitely there. And again, I've never been inside that house, and look what I experienced. I mean,
Yeah.
so when people always ask me, I thought it was a hoax. Hey, man, it's the most infamous haunted house in the world, like over
Yes.
30 something movies, I think,
Yes. Yes.
about this thing. And of course, something that has that much notoriety is going to be scrutinized just as much. But, of course, Hollywood exaggerates stories. But I will tell you again, I've had firsthand experience and seen this up close and personal.
Yeah.
Whatever's associated with that house is pure evil. And I know that from my own experience. And again, I think that's what's so interesting about the documentary when all the other documentaries just tell the story is a hoax. And this documentary goes into my personal experiences and actual, you know, paranormal phenomenon and unexplained, pieces of evidence that are connected somehow to the case and validating and referencing some of the visions and experiences I had that you don't see without evidence, just me telling the story.
That's really interesting too, because you're right. I mean, we've all watched these documentaries. There's a zillion of them, right? And Amityville stuff is just it's so interesting. It goes on and on and on, and just we love it so much, and we can't get enough of it. And yeah, you're right. Most of them are like a cookie cutter kind of thing, where it is kind of here's what happened, here's the murder, here's the movies, here's the family, blah, so on and so forth. Yours is unique, and you go and you do this. Like I don't know a lot of investigation ones that I've seen. I mean, the Warrens did this whole big seance that was on TV back in the late 70s and whatever. Um, that part is very cool. So, what then? Tell me what you think, or if you know, what is the evil that is in that house or that area that is living in that area? What is it, or do you know, or will you find out at some point, or is it something you don't want to know, right?
Well, I mean, from all the research I did, the Historical Society confirmed that that was a Native American burial
So
ground
that's
there.
one of the stories too, right? Yeah.
So, and I think it's a really interesting and fascinating connectivity that's going on between the fact that the Native Americans that would bury their criminally insane up, heads face down,
Hmm.
and the entire family and DeFeo family were all face down in their
Mm,
beds, and no one
yeah.
heard the gunshots. And to
There you
me,
go.
theoretically, I'm just throwing out that it seems like there may have been some perfect storm that evening where there was some sort of mass induced sleep paralysis holding down the entire family and
Wow.
muting the gunshots so he could go around and actually commit this multiple murders of the entire family. That's to me, that's just too much of a connection to be not a coincidence.
So you think something then controlled Ron DeFeo doing that night for him to do that
Well, the
then?
combination of Native American burial grounds. I mean, all you got the stories of that they were complaining that there was haunting stuff going on in the house. That's why he's putting religious, statues all on the property. And, there's
Yeah.
some sort of story. One of the interviews I think Ed was talking about, there may have been even some satanic stuff that Ron DeFeo Jr. was messing with as well.
Yes.
So, you know, uh, there's a bunch of factors. And if they were connected with the mob, and if there's any
Uh,
like killings,
uh,
and like if there
uh,
was any sort of occult activity, and then you have the abuse in there.
yeah.
I mean, all of that negative, oppressive energy could literally give all of that within that house and that environment the family was living in to create potentially the level of phenomenon that led to their murders that night.
So let me get your take on this. I asked other people this too. You've got six people, whatever, five, six people that get killed with a shotgun. Okay. Shotguns aren't quiet in the middle of the night. Neighbors are nearby. We've all been to the house. We know how close they are. What is your take? How is no one hearing this and calling the police in the middle? I don't get that. I want to know what your thoughts on that are, because I've heard an interesting take on. You mentioned the mafia part, and they knew that, and they were like, "We're not trying to get wrapped up in their mafia BS. Like, I'm not even getting involved in this." But what do you think about that?
Well, I think if I stand corrected, the authorities tested out, the gunshots that gunshots he with the gun he used, and
Hmm.
the neighborhood heard those shots from when that person was in the house. So that's why this case is one of the most fascinating, tragic, creepy, and interesting story paranormal wise in the
Yeah,
history of all of these cases,
yeah.
because there's so many strange circumstances that have led to the events that have taken place in that house. So, but whatever it is, again, I mean, there's something to it. There's definitely something to it,
What
and
do
it's
you
no joke.
what do you think about George Lutz and all like the transcendental meditation things he was doing and all that stuff? And was he opening gates? Was he opening doors
Well, I
that he
mean,
shouldn't have been messing around with?
it made me wonder about even his voice coming through and saying "stole my soul." It's like,
Right,
why would your soul be stolen? I mean, what were you doing in that house? I mean, were
right,
you doing
right.
occult activity? did you make it worse? I don't know. I don't know what the factors at play. We can only speculate, but again, it leaves us open to, just more interesting pathways to kind of wonder, what he was doing. But, the fact of the matter is that they kept all the original furniture that the DeFeo family had in their house, and like their
That's
bedroom,
crazy.
their
That's so
bedpost
crazy.
that they were murdered on,
That's
they were sleeping in those beds. And anyone that's in the paranormal research and in the field in general, I mean, knows that any item has retains energy, especially with
sure.
history behind it. And those kids and the family killed them and living in and all that. I mean, that's kind of like a mirror of what was going on. Then you have him potentially kind of egging it on with God knows what with his
Right.
occult incentives going on inside the house. I mean, that probably created something, that where they ran out after 28 days.
Yeah, you got this whole like whirlwind of stuff going on. It's just like out of control, right? So I don't know. That is it's frightening. How does it make you feel then if you can go and you can help this boy, the spirit, cross over? What feeling of like relief or positive feeling? What does that do to you when you're doing this? Because you're doing this work for a reason, and does it make you validate what you're doing? I guess, right?
Well, yeah, just it's been a recurring theme of how I've been approaching the paranormal. I just
Right.
began praying for spirits, and now I do it all the time in my investigations. And I really believe that I have a lot more evidence than your average person because of that, because I'm not just going to treat them like a gerbil and spin on a wheel or do a backflip and then take off. Like I genuinely want to try to help them, and I have a
Mm-hmm.
mutual respect and treat these spirits as they should, because we're brothers and sisters coming from the same source of light. And I feel like they can sense that on your aura, your characterization to your energy, and they'll be more receptive to you and willing to use their energy to use these devices and use their energy to manifest in any way that they can, especially if they need help. And most of them do need help. They're desperate for
Yeah.
it. They want acknowledgement to feel like they're alive again. And it's amazing how many spirits come to me and ask for help. It's very fulfilling to have to potentially have your hand in helping a spirit, especially a child. I mean, even the thought of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah, I'm
but
sure, man.
yeah, it's a very, very good feeling. It makes me feel purposeful in what I'm doing. It's not just about the thrills and the chills. Of course, that's in there, but
Mm-hmm.
that there's nothing that even compares to that, something like that.
So I've heard this before. Do these folks, this is a cliche, I don't know, you tell me. Do these folks, a lot of them, do they know they've passed on? Or do they know they're no longer living and they're stuck in a limbo, or they just really not know what's happening?
People ask me that question
Right.
a lot too, but it's not one answer. I
Yeah.
think there's souls that don't know they're dead. There's
Okay.
souls that we can't communicate with. There's souls that are completely intelligent. I think there is levels and different diversified types of spirits, what they're capable of thinking, their consciousness of energy, and also what they're able to do when it comes to interacting with us in the physical plane, whether they can use energy to move a physical object or interact with any of the devices we use or communicate clearly through the ITC devices.
Okay. So people like, well, I guess I'll say me. Look, when I'm in the city, New York City, I'm making a pit stop in Amityville. I'm doing a drive by. I'm taking photos. I'm checking the play. Just it's what we do, right?
Right.
But you got folks who want to mess around with, oh, I'm going to conjure something. Don't play around with this stuff. You can tell people firsthand. Don't even say in the whole episode. Don't mess. There's something going on there, right? Do you have anything you want to say to anyone that would want to play around with this? Or, I mean, like, don't screw around. Don't release this energy. Don't try to contact this. Like, what would you tell someone that would say, I'm going to try to conjure up a spirit of the DeFeo family or something?
Well, I mean, there's some serious dark
Right.
energies circling around this case, and if you poke it, I mean,
It's
it's
your
on the
ass.
table of what could potentially happen.
Right.
You might think that you're summoning the DeFeo family, but it might be something trying to trick you that it's something that it's not, to gain access to you and try to oppress you, which would be a psychological breakdown of you and worse from there.
Oof.
Um, you just got to be super careful, but whatever that's around that case and still resonates around there, yeah, it's just waiting in the shadows for someone else to feed off with negativity, or ultimately would want you to harm yourself or others that you care about.
That's interesting. Talk, yeah, negative feeding off. It's just like in life with people like that who are just nasty. They feed off like that negative, and it helps them. Oh man.
Hmm.
So what about? I feel like no one's really said much of the owners since then, or we've never heard much about it. So, do you think anyone is experiencing anything and they're not talking about it? I mean, based on what you think, there's something there. What do you think about that?
You were breaking up there for a second. What was it?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, based on what we've heard, or at least I've heard over the years, there's been many owners, and it sounds like no one's really said much about anything happening to them there. So, what do you think if there's some still there? Do you think things have happened to people and they just don't want to talk about it, or what do you think about that?
I think they're in denial. I think there's little
Yeah.
things that have
Okay.
happened in there.
Okay.
I have heard some interesting information in the background that I'm not sure if it's truly true or not, but I'll keep that to myself. But
Hmm.
I do believe, I mean, like I said, if I'm experiencing this outside the house, and I remember even when I was going there, when that kid was still coming through, he's like, come up and play. He was telling me to come in
Oh,
the house.
wow.
I mean, I wish I still had that clip because I was looking for it for the documentary, but I couldn't find it. But you know, there's stuff going on there, whether they're denying it, they're just not saying it, but
Yeah.
there's too much. I know somebody that's been in the house and they felt energy in the house. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
feels kind of like strange in there. So just from even hearing that, I mean, I'm sure that I would go. Now, mind you, even on the documentary, I believe it's on there, is that there was a realtor that went in there in I think 2010 who felt a
Yes.
chill and pressure on his chest,
Yeah.
ran out of there, and because he was so frightened.
Yeah.
And you'd think that, oh, he's just BSing and he's faking it. But if that was the case, then why didn't he run to every major news network to try and talk about it?
Right.
You can't even find it on the internet. You kind of have to like search hard for something like that.
Yeah.
I was able to figure that out. So
It's
uh,
crazy.
again, it just makes it more, interesting to me because I'd love to just sit in that house for 24
Oh,
hours.
you know what? I tell you, I'm with you. And if you do, please call me. I'll come with you. I'd love to find out too. So, 50 years later, all these movies, all this, I mean, again, this is such a fascinating topic. It really is. So, you've seen the original and remake, I'm sure, and probably the nonsense in between.
Yeah.
From what you've experienced and, watching these Hollywood, of course, what do you think about what's going on there now? And what do you think are, do they represent these films, what you think you felt in there? What do you think?
I think the first
Not
one.
in there, I should say. You weren't in there, but while you were there, I should say.
Well, I thought the first and second one was the best ones that were really creepy. The
Yeah,
second one
yeah,
was really disturbing, and it's like it shows
yeah.
the prequel of the family and Ron DeFeo and stuff.
Right,
Obviously, it has its own, rights of going to its own cohesive story it wants to tell. But,
right.
I mean, that's how Hollywood is. You're going to have elements of the genuine stuff,
Yeah.
and then, a little exaggerated stuff or just different things that they put in there that may or may not been, real. I would love to have my hands in a movie and create something that's truly real to the point, um, from my own experience and knowing like what these things actually do and making it as real and raw as possible to let the
Mm.
viewers have a deeper understanding of how it really
Oh
does
yeah,
happen, not the eccentric over the top stuff that can happen sometimes.
absolutely. Okay. Wow. Sean Austin's on the program. This is really cool. This is Amityville month we're doing here. This is a nice bonus episode for everybody. Please watch Amityville Resurgence. It's a great episode. I thought it was really, really good. I know it affected you personally, and I think it, helped with your career. That's great. Let people know out there where they can keep up with you and watch. I mean, you're doing some cool stuff out there. I think you're making some music too. Where can everyone keep up and find out all the stuff you're doing?
Pretty much most of my social media handles are at Sean D. Austin, like they say. It's Sean D is in David Austin, and I have my own paranormal app coming out in the next
Yes.
couple of weeks. The company's called Spirit Phone Innovations, short for spy, like you're spying in the afterlife. It is a brand new way to communicate with spirits that's never been done, and we've been testing it out. It's been really exciting to see what kind of results people have. It's going to be available on iPhones first,
Nice.
between October 10th and 15th. You'll see it as SPI in the Apple Store, so look out for it very soon. It's going to be really exciting to explain how it works to everybody and that it's scientific, how we're actually getting the evidence, not like all these other apps where there's so much more of a process of elimination and then areas for skepticism, for people that want to try to debunk it.
I will be adding this app to my phone. John, thank you very much. For everyone out there listening, of course, you guys know us at the Scary Movie Project, Instagram, Facebook, the Scary Movie Project at gmail.com. Please go to the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, love us there. We've had a blast talking Amityville. Sean's other stuff, Scare Network, you can go to Devil Down South, Malfeast, right? And there was one other one you got up there. I don't remember the other one, but
Here,
yeah,
Letchworth.
there you go. So all his stuff is there. Go check it all out. I've reviewed it. It's awesome. He's really good stuff. Keep doing it. Thank you for coming on. And until then, everybody, remember the truth is out there.
The Scary Movie Project podcast. Learn more at thescarymovieproject.com.